morning. Welcome to day 6 of 8th grade speeches. Thank you all for joining us today. Before we get started, please join me in prayer. Bow your heads. Dear Lord, thank you for everyone gathered here now. We are blessed that you know each of us by name and are always by our side. Fill our hearts with your presence and please be with today's speakers. Give them confidence, reassurance, and peace. Amen. Please welcome our first speaker, Will Seals, who is speaking on the evolution of football safety equipment.
Each year, an average of 12.2 deaths are caused by injuries to high school and college football players. The game of football has been around for over 100 years and has been a popular sport since its inception. The game has certainly evolved over the years to include the addition and improvement of the safety equipment. While still dangerous, it is one of the most popular sports in the country. Football began in the late 1860s and has changed a lot. Formations have changed, scorekeeping has changed, rules have changed, teams have changed, and of course players have changed. One thing we may not think about when contemplating the history of the game is the evolution of the equipment used by players throughout the sport's decorated history. Football competition officially began in 1869. Rutgers University and its neighbor Princeton played the first game of the intercollegiate football on November 6, 1869, on a plot of ground where the present-day Rutgers Gymnasium now stands, in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Rutgers won the first game 6-4. Athletes wore coats and vests and used suspenders as belts. They wore no safety equipment. President Teddy Roosevelt had decreed football a violent game and said changes were going to have to be made to keep the game legal. In the past, playing football with no protection was normal. But football can cause traumatic injuries. Protection for players was a necessity if the game and its players wanted a future. The leather helmet protected the ears and sides of the head. The problem was that people were still getting injured. They then made a face mask on the leather helmet. The mask was made up of a singular plastic bar across the face that provided some protection. Football has come a long way in increasing the safety provided by helmets, shoulder pads, and cleats. When shoulder pads were invented, they covered the whole torso with padding that minimized injury. Shoulder pads first started to be worn by players shortly after 1910. Leather shoulder pads were worn to protect the players' upper bodies. However, shoulder pads were commonly worn by all football athletes until the 1950s, and they still were just pieces of leather strapped together. By the 1960s, shoulder pads consisted of foam and hard plastic, but the pads didn't breathe. So while they protected the players from injury, they tended to cause players to dehydrate quicker, leading to exhaustion. At the start of this century, new synthetic fibers were added to the pads, thus making them lighter and cooler, preventing dehydration of football athletes during competition. Football has now been able to make things more compact and somehow able to protect people from injury. As far as overall construction goes, the pants have experienced the least change of any part of the equipment used to play the game of football. The padded football pants became a part of the game as early as the 1880s. The original material for the pants was a canvas and the pads, though light were sewn into the knee and thigh regions, providing at least some measure of protection. Padded pants were not used in the early days of football, however, because as I said, no protection was used whatsoever. Pants have not really changed throughout the years and are great for being tackled and not getting turf burn. The first cleats used for football were actually developed for another sport, baseball, but in 1873, metal baseball cleats became illegal and were replaced by wood and leather spikes. Later in the 1920s, interchangeable rubber cleats emerged. When the rules were established mandating a large surface area for the cleat to prevent skin and clothing penetration, metal became an acceptable material for the cleats. In the mid-1920s, the first low-cut shoe was introduced, although high tops were still more popular until the late 1950s. Decades later, with the development of artificial turf, significant changes came to the sport's footwear. Instead of the traditional spikes, which is sometimes still used to refer to cleats now, the entire sole of the shoe contained numerous smaller spikes on a one-piece molded sole. Today's football shoes incorporate these smaller spikes and are also made from lighter synthetic materials. Football is a sport that is loved by so many people around the U.S. Playing football is risky when it comes to the safety, but it would be more dangerous if we didn't have the protection we have now. Think about it. If we were living in the 1800s when it was invented, it would be a whole different story for us. Thank you. Please welcome Nathan Boatner, who is speaking on technology and baseball.
Baseball has been around for many years and is a fun and exciting sport to play. Therefore, more technology Baseball has been around for many years and is a fun and exciting sport to play. It is important not to make many mistakes because it can cause the team to get scored on. Therefore, more technology is being made to help players improve on their mistakes and help them turn into a better baseball player. It is important not to make many mistakes because it can cause the team to get scored on. The first technology that I've learned about is the K-Vest. The K-Vest is a sensor that is placed on the leading arm, the upper torso, and the pelvis of the batter. This technology gathers information about a batter's swing, and the data is transmitted onto a computer to see their swing efficiency. Once the batter swings, a representation of the swing will be presented onto a computer. This technology costs around $5,500 per day. The swing tracker is a sensor that attaches to the knob of a bat and shows data about angles, planes, and velocity to show a 3D replica of a batter's swing. The damage potential feature estimates the flight distance and the path of the ball as it travels through the air. This technology costs around $100 for the technology and $5 for the software. Radar technology is used to check the velocity of the ball off of a hitter's bat and a pitcher's throw on the spin on the ball after it has been thrown. The Rapsodo is a sensor that sits on the ground between home plate. This technology tracks the ball's speed, velocity, and spin of the ball for the pitcher, the launch angle, and the projected hit outcome for the batter. This technology costs around $4,000 per unit. Another technology is the Pitch FX, and it is used to examine the movement, spin, and velocity of a baseball that has been thrown. This allows coaches and other people to examine every pitch that has been thrown. It will also help pitchers know what pitches will and won't work against certain teams. Pitch analysis is used to help pitchers see where they are struggling so they can fix their mistakes. The mistakes are seen by an advanced video camera that records the pitcher while they pitch so that they can improve on their mistakes and hopefully throw better pitches. The Epigenetics SC1 is a high-speed video camera that is capable of capturing up to 22,000 frames per second. Some teams use the slow-motion visual to see how pitcher's grip changes as he releases the ball, or how small adjustments in finger position affect the ball's rotation. This technology costs around $6,495. TrackMan uses high-tech radars that are enhanced with optical tracking to capture pitch velocity, movement, release point, spin rate, and more. It is a system that measures the location and trajectory of the spin of a pitch. The StatCast is a technology that analyzes a player's movement and skills. This lets coaches know who is performing better than others. This will also help coaches decide who will play and who will not. Almost, if not all, of the major league teams are using StatCast to capture important and helpful data and then display it to the audience. Epigenetics is a plethora of sensors consisting of 8 to 16 cameras that check the joints. It also tracks the movement of a pitcher and hitter. This helps the players see what their mistakes are so they can fix them. This technology takes about 10 hours to transform the information into data. The Epigenetics costs around $80,000 to $150,000 depending on how many sensors you purchase. Batting cages have been around for a while now and they've gotten more advanced over the years. With new and better designs, trainers can set up quickly and effortlessly in a gym, ballpark, or any other kind of facility. This allows players to practice their swing wherever they are, even during the game. Player safety is a top concern, but too much protective gear could affect how their movement and affect the game greatly. Modern technology has allowed for the creation of equipment that is safe and comfortable and protective. On top of improved padding for pitchers and better helmets for hitters, they are starting to make protective headgear for pitchers too. These helmets are comfortable and lightweight so pitchers don't feel uncomfortable or stressed while they're pitching, because pitching is an important aspect of baseball. More importantly, the helmets offer protection that was previously not available for pitchers. For pitchers, there are new hats that have built-in helmets so that if there is a line drive that goes right back to the pitcher, they'll have more protection with the new hat design than with the normal hat. The MLB is now using iPads instead of notebooks with papers and pencils. These tablets are used for replay purposes, and the tablets come with an app called the MLB Dugout app. This app helps the scouting platform of baseball and is very good for analyzing gameplay. New devices don't just allow for teams to gather performance data and practice, they can also work in games as well. They are very close to radar and camera systems used in training. Being able to track this data in games does not just help players, but it provides more entertaining audience experiences. Virtual reality has also been used in baseball to help players analyze how well they are doing. There has also been virtual reality provided for the fans to feel like they are in the dugout or on the baseball field via video games. Technology has changed baseball drastically over the years, and this new technology lets players and coaches practice, and this will help players improve on their mistakes with things that they just need help on. Baseball is a fun sport that many people enjoy to play, and this new technology lets players improve on their mistakes. Thank you. Please welcome Macon Dickerson for speaking on bow hunting.
What is bow hunting? Bow hunting is the act of hunting a wild animal with a bow and arrow to hopefully be able to harvest the animal to provide food for your family and others. Bow hunting is so much more than just trying to kill an animal. It takes lots of hard work to prepare your property for the animals to be healthy. The most common animal in our area to bow hunt is the white-tailed deer. Many people, including myself, put lots of time, effort, and money into bow hunting white-tailed deer. Hunting for most people is just a hobby, but for me it is a passion. Bow hunting has been my passion ever since I shot my first deer with a bow when I was 11 years old. Today you will learn the history of bow hunting, how it became popular, and how bow hunting is a true art. Bow hunting has been around for thousands and thousands of years, but it wasn't just a hobby. It was how most people acquired meat to survive. Bow hunting is thought to have begun around 20,000 BC. The earliest known time that bow hunting was around was during the ancient Egyptians. The Egyptians were thought to adopted archery around 3000 BC. They used archery for hunting as well as warfare. The Egyptians are the earliest known archers. There are two main people really known for making modern day bow hunting popular today. Those two people are Dr. Saxon Pope and Arthur Young. In the early 1900s, Pope and Young cared for the last known survivor of the Yana tribe in California. The last known survivor of the Yana tribe in California was a man by the name of Ishi. Ishi showed Pope and Young his great bow hunting skills and greatly impressed them. Ishi also showed Pope and Young how he made his equipment and demonstrated to them his great techniques of stalking and shooting the animal. Pope and Young used what they had learned from Ishi to create their own equipment. Their equipment could be used to hunt a variety of small and large game animals. Pope published a book titled Hunting with a Bow and Arrow in 1923. This book helped introduce bow hunting to many Americans. A big invention that majorly helped grow the hunting industry was the invention of the compound bow. The first compound bow was made by Holness Wilbur Allen in 1966. The invention of the compound bow helped advance bow hunting by giving hunters more technology than just the recurve and longbow. The compound bow is different than the recurve and longbow because it has limbs that are connected to the riser and has cams at the top and bottom of the bow that rotate when the bowstring is pulled back. The compound bow also has cables that are connected to the cams that tighten when the cam is rotating. All this technology was invented when the compound bow was invented. This technology helps the arrow fly faster and be more consistent. The cams also allow for let-off, which allows for less force to be held on it at full draw. These inventions have made big improvements and changes to the way we are able to hunt today. Bow hunting preparation starts way before the opening day of bow season. Hunting requires both mental and physical preparation. You have to be able to prepare your body to execute the shot at a monster white-tailed buck under pressure. You have to prepare yourself to be able to execute this shot because it could be an opportunity of a lifetime at a massive buck. Your heart starts to race and it could be cold outside, which makes it harder for you to pull back your bow. To help yourself prepare for that shot, you should practice shooting in different situations. Ways to do this are by practicing at last light, in different angles in the wind, and practicing at different temperatures. There is lots of work that goes into preparing land as a bow hunter. Preparing your land for deer season is a big task in the first place, but when bow hunting it gives more challenges, because you have to make it possible for the deer to come within 40 yards to be within bow range. You have to cut certain tree limbs for the deer to make the right path to be within bow range, and cut down certain limbs also to make a clear shot for your arrow to not be affected by limbs, and for you to also be hidden from the deer. The biggest thing that goes into the art of bow hunting is the patience and trusting the process that if you work hard to harvest the deer you want, God will bless you with the harvest. Today, I hope you have a better understanding of bow hunting and understand why it is my passion and maybe make it a passion of your own. Thank you. Please welcome Ethan McGorian, who is speaking on the International Space Station.
The International Space Station, more commonly known as the ISS, is a lab that orbits the Earth. It's about the size of a football field, but costs a whopping $140 billion to build. The ISS is currently 23 years old, but countries still make new modules to add to have the most up-to-date equipment. Wilhelm von Braun, a German-American rocket scientist, came up with the idea. Having a place where people can live and research on a circular station that rotates to produce artificial gravity. Almost 40 years later, on January 25, 1984, when President Ronald Reagan gave orders to the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, to build Space Station Freedom, which was its original name. It was planned to be a sky. The first piece or module of the space station was launched in 1998. This project took 10 years and over 30 missions. But modules are still being added to more powerful science equipment to test things that can't do on Earth. These modules have helped us with understanding the universe and with it living in space. Without the help of the ISS, scientists were lag behind many years. The scientists on the ISS help us on Earth to understand how to grow high-quality protein, improve eye surgery with space hardware, and even develop improved vaccines. On January 29, 1998, representatives from the United States, Russia, Japan, Canada, and other countries met at the U.S. State Department to develop and sign an international space station intergovernmental agreement. This agreement outlined the development of a module that will provide living quarters for crew members on board. On October 31st, 2000, the first crew composed of Russians and Americans launched to live on the ISS. Now, more than 20 years later, multinational crews continue to live and research on the ISS. The ISS is the world's largest single structure who has ever been to space. It has been continuously occupied since November 2nd, 2000. As of April 2021, 244 individuals from 19 countries have visited the ISS. The ISS is a world-class scientific laboratory for studying biological and physical processes in the near absence of gravity. According to the Planetary Society, the space station science and research on board generally falls into 4 categories. Studies on how living in space affects the human body, technology demonstrations for future space flight, physical science experiments that benefit from the station's weightlessness, earth science and astrophysics, instruments that use the station as an orbital platform. Its scientists have also studied how to treat the human body when they live in microgravity for a long period of time. NASA and its partners have learned how to keep the spacecraft working well. All these lessons would be important for future space exploration. NASA is currently working on plans to explore other worlds. The space station is one of the first steps. NASA used its lessons learned from the space station to prepare humans for further space exploration to reach far into space than ever before. The ISS is at constant risk of impact upon space debris. This is a particular challenge in space as the ISS is at constant risk of impact upon space debris. NASA is constantly evaluating the station's condition. NASA is confident that the spacecraft will remain healthy through 2030. Even with the end of the ISS site, one thing is clear. The ISS has brought science forward in imaginable ways. Please welcome Urban Dykes, who's speaking on Is Addiction Hereditary?
Is addiction hereditary, or is it caused by outside activities? Well, today we'll find out. First, genes are the functional units of DNA that make up the human body. They provide the information that directs the body's basic cellular activities. Scientists have been studying genes for a while, and they have been able to isolate the genes that provide most of the body's functions. Hereditary means a tendency to run in families, which means if either one of your parents were susceptible to any type of addiction, it can be passed on to you. Both of your parents make up your genes. One gene from either one of your parents can put you at a high risk of becoming drug addicted. Scientists estimate genetic factors account for 40 to 60% of a person's vulnerability to addiction.
Studying gene variations in people with drug addiction may help scientists understand who is at a greater risk of becoming drug addicted. Certain gene sequences may make a person more prone to drug addiction. Major breakthroughs have been discovered, whereas certain brain proteins have been linked to drug vulnerability. PSD95 and DRPP32 are two brain proteins that play a role in drug addiction. This is a huge leap in science to determine if these brain proteins are hereditary and cause a person to be more prone to drug addiction. The brain protein DRPP32 is linked to opiates, cocaine, and amphetamines, and the protein PSD95 is also thought to play a role in the addiction to nicotine, alcohol, and heroin. Brain imaging is used to determine how many D2 receptors. Those with fewer D2 receptors, which control your attention, sleep, memory, and learning, are more likely to have an addiction. This advanced research is helpful in finding a way to prevent this form of brain disease. Since genes are made up of DNA, scientists are researching DNA sequencing to determine links to addiction. It is the blueprint of health to determine why some people become addicted and others do not. Genetic predisposition plays a huge role in addiction. The gene ALDH2 produces an enzyme that is directly related to how the body breaks down and digests alcohol. We ask ourselves why some people become addicted and others are not affected. People of East Asian descent have two variants of the gene ALDH2. One produces normal enzyme activity while the other variant is inactive. Someone with an inactive variant is at risk for acetaldehyde buildup, which damages your DNA and prevents you from repairing the damage, putting them at greater risk for alcohol-related esophageal cancer. Scientific evidence indicates alcohol is a complex genetic disease. Genetic differences affect risk, but there is no gene for alcoholism. Studies consistently show that genetics contribute to addiction. SNPs are the most common type of addiction variation in people, and differences in just a single letter of the genetic code from person to person. If an SNP appears more often in people with the disease than those without it, it is thought to either directly affect the susceptibility to that disease or be another marker for a variant that has. Epigenetics is the study of how your behaviors and environment can cause change that affect your way your genes work. Unlike genetic changes, epigenetic changes are reversible and do not cause a change in your DNA sequence, but they can change how your body reads the DNA sequence. Environmental or lifestyle choices make the DNA, which increases your brain proteins common in addiction. Identical twins are born with the same genetic footprint over time. As they are exposed to differences in their environment and make choices of their own, their DNA gets marked with different information that can affect their behavior, their risk of addiction, and even their response to treatment. Some of these changes can be passed on to later generations. This is called epigenetics. As we can see, DNA sequencing, behaviors, and environments all play a role in addiction. Addictions can be substance or non-substance. People engaging in addictive activities to escape discomfort, both physical and emotional, whether it is substance such as tobacco, alcohol, or drugs, or a non-substance such as gambling, people's brains release a dopamine chemical that makes them feel good or better. Dopamine is a natural chemical released in the brain that makes people feel good or better. A mutation on the COMT gene can lead to alcohol abuse. The COMT gene helps the body manage dopamine. A mutation on the COMT gene can lead to alcohol abuse. The COMT gene helps the body manage dopamine. Addictive drugs stimulate dopamine levels, which require the brain to need more. This is when a person will become addicted to their stimulant of choice. Addiction is a brain disease with biological, psychological, social, and environmental factors that about half of the risk is genetic. Individuals with an untreated mental illness are at risk for substance abuse. These addictions are considered biological disorders. With all the scientific studies going on, they have made great strides in determining that genetics influences substance abuse disorders. The study of genes in drug addiction has caused scientists to dismiss the idea that addiction is a sign of weakness, but instead it is viewed as a brain disorder. As scientists learn more and more about how addiction is a sign of weakness, but instead it is viewed as a brain disease or disorder. As scientists, genetic testing is the key to determining who has a predisposition to addiction, but also in the treatment of addiction. According to this information, addiction is hereditary. There are also social and environmental factors that play a role in addiction. The company you keep, the environment you live in, peer pressure, and your socioeconomic level all play a part in addiction. The fact is, drugs change people's brains, and if you know you have a predisposition to addiction, then you should seek treatment. Addiction is treatable, whether it is hereditary, social, or environmental. People do not inherit an alcohol use or drug use disorder. They inherit a risk of developing this. One helps someone with a disease like cancer, but addiction carries a stigma that the person is bad or no good. Since addiction is so prevalent in our society today, we need to look past the stigmas and treat someone as we would with medical illness. Addiction is a medical illness that changes the way the brain functions. We must find a way for gene therapy to kill these mutated genes, just as scientists are using gene therapy to kill cancer cells. Thank you. Please welcome Avery Bell, who is speaking on George Washington Carver.
George Washington Carver was an agricultural scientist and inventor who made numerous discoveries and developed hundreds of new products using not only peanuts but soybeans and sweet potatoes. He was a big part of saving many farmers' land and soil. When discovering cures for farmers' land, he created many other products with the use of one plant, the peanut. Most people might only know him for the wonders he did with the peanut, but he is also known for so much more. Personally, I only knew him for the peanut. When I discovered that he was a scientist and developed many ways to help fix farmers' land, it interests me to learn more about this. Today, I will address the points of why Carver was so interested in improving agriculture, why Carver needed to solve agricultural problems in the South, and how people today still use Carver's methods of farming. As a child, Carver was a slave and was very sick. He couldn't do all the hard-working farming, so he tended to the garden. In the garden is where he developed his interest for plants. He had always had a love for plants and animals, but this brought it out. Since he was a child, Carver had always wanted to go to school, but couldn't because he was a slave. So, as he grew older, he knew that he wanted to go to school for agriculture. As he created many solutions for soil, George Washington Carver believed he had a God-given mission to use his training to help as an agricultural chemist to help improve a lot of poor black and white farmers' land. He truly believed that this was his calling and God spoke to him to take this path. Carver also wanted farmers to buy land and have their own sustainable business to prove that they could take care of their land. The reason why George Washington Carver was so attracted by the peanut was that it was easy to cultivate and enriches the soil, and it was a ready source of protein. An especially important consideration since poor black farmers could not afford meat. The reason Carver invented all of those peanut applications was to build a market for nitrogen-rich plants that could fix southern soil. In the South, there were problems that many of the farmers were facing, but Carver had the answer since he had earned a master's degree in agriculture from Iowa State. In the South, there were problems to do with the soil not having enough nitrogen to grow the plants properly. The farmers were experiencing these plants because of the overuse of planting cotton and tobacco. Carver was very interested and wanted to try to cure and fix the soil, and that's what he did. At the Tuskegee Institute of Alabama, he devoted a lot of time to his work and developed crop rotation. The system of crop rotation became very successful. Also, while at the colleges he went to, Carver performed many experiments with different plants that could help with the nitrogen problem. Experimenting with the various plants, he discovered that there were many plants that could help fix the nitrogen problem, but peanuts and sweet potatoes were the most effective. After he discovered this, according to ACI's Chemistry for Life, through his research, Carver urged Southern farmers to rotate cotton with soil-enhancing crops such as soybeans and sweet potatoes. Carver also expressed his skepticism of the overuse of commercial fertilizer. The soil provided short-term gains, but in the long term, could release dangerous chemicals that could erode the soil's quality away from it being dry and creating runoffs. Instead, he influenced farmers to use a more natural fertilizer such as animal manure. After the farmers started to listen to Carver and rotate crops, they saw really great results, but many of the farmers didn't know what to do with the abundance of sweet potatoes and peanuts. Carver solved this problem by inventing many different ways for the use of both of these crops. According to ACS Chemistry for Life, from the peanut, Carver developed a host of new products, most notably milk, but also butter, milk, Worcester sauce, various punches, cooking oils, salad oils, and medicines, as well as cosmetics such as hand lotions, base creams, and powder. Altogether, he discovered more than 300 food, industrial, and commercial uses from the peanut. From the sweet potato, he created things like flour, vinegar, or even writing ink, paint, and dyes. Leading up to all of these discoveries, Carver had to have had a workspace, and he certainly did. At the school he taught at the Tuskegee Institute of Alabama, he and his students built their lab out of things they could find, because at the time, the school wasn't financially stable. This goes to show how much Carver was committed to solving problems in the South with the soil and teaching other people how to manage and take care of their crops. Carver also cared about farmers and wanted them to succeed. Farmers today still use Carver's methods of farming. Carver published bulletins for farmers to help improve the quality of the soil. These bulletins included information on cultivation techniques and crops. The bulletins also provided information on science for teachers and recipes for cooks. Carver also taught farmers how to recycle nutrients from swamp muck. He believed in using compost to better enrich the soil. He went to great lengths and measures to get his point across that compost provided greater productivity. He taught farmers the practice of crop rotation and cover crops. These practices are still used today and are greatly appreciated because they are still used today in today's time. George Washington Carver believed it was his God-given gift to help farmers. The methods Carver developed are still used today because of his teachings, bulletins, and experiments. He left a legacy that continues to have an impact on agriculture today. Thank you. Please welcome Jada Hurst, who will be speaking on the history of gospel music.
Have you ever heard a song that moved you to the point where you want to tell other friends about it? Well, that's the type of feeling you may experience when listening to gospel music. By its very definition, the term gospel means good news. Gospel music is the one way that dancing Christianity have respected audiences around the world. Gospel music encourages participation in musical community while giving praise to God. Gospel music is deeply rooted in the rich traditions of the African American church. During the late 1800s, African American churches in the southern United States started introducing various styles of music to their worship services, including spirituals, hymns, and other simple songs. Such music was primarily sung in church and accompanied by hand clapping and foot stomping. Today, the roots of gospel music have worn their way to the work of contemporary musicians, both religious and non-religious. In the 19th century, enslaved people turned to music in the church to express their longing for freedom. Styles known as the African American spirituals were popular in churches as a way for slaves to express their love for food to their communities. Some well-known spirituals are Sweet Love, Sweet Chariot, Down by the River, and He's Got a Whole in His Hands. Almost a century later, artists drew from these spirituals as they migrated from rural to urban life during the first half of the 20th century. They brought the sounds of those country singer roots of the churches and combined them with the more current sounds of the time. During its early development, gospel music featured simple piano or organ at cappella singers. Over time, gospel began incorporating traits of secular music, particularly country music, blues, and ragtime, which made the music more entertaining to listeners. Early Black American gospel stars included Five Blind Boys in Mississippi, the Five Blind Boys in Alabama, Sister Lizette Garden, and Arizona Trades. Chicago musician Thomas A. Dorsey saw great potential in Black American gospel music. In 1930, he began a publishing house dedicated to the art form. The Dorsey House of Music was the first Black-owned gospel publishing company. As a songwriter, Dorsey came to be known as the Fire of Gospel Music and partnered with Mahalia Jackson to usher gospel music into culture. Black gospel music reaches popular peak in the decades surrounding World War II. Vibrant gospel cities emerge in cities touched by the Great Migration, the Black immigration from the South to the North, including New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Los Angeles. Major gospel stars of the era include Roberto Martin, Clara Ward, Bill Chambers, Soulsters, and Rev. James Cleveland. By the 1950s and 1960s, many gospel artists began to step foot into the mainstream secular music. Soul R&B singers such as Little Richard, Aretha Franklin, and Sam Cooke all learned a trade in the madness of Pentecostal gospel choirs, which laid the foundation for the secular R&B and rock music. Gospel music is also deeply influenced in the sound of soul in the 1960s and 1970s. Today, gospel artists experiment with the new popular music styles such as hip-hop and contemporary R&B. Gospel music has propelled many singers to stardom. Before the most famous are Mahalia Jackson, Aretha Franklin, Kirk Franklin, and Reverend Al Green. Mahalia Jackson was known in her lifetime as a good gospel. She learned her music in the Baptist church, and she famously teamed with Chicago songwriter and publisher Thomas A. Dorsey to become one of gospel music's first major stars. Aretha Franklin got her start singing in the gospel choir at the New Bethel Baptist Church in Detroit, Michigan. She signed with Columbia Records at the age of 18, but by the end of her career, she had over 100 charted Billboard singles, and her hits found popularity amongst both gospel, R&B, and rock and roll fans. Franklin was inducted into Gospel Music Hall of Fame in 2012. Kirk Franklin is a 16-time Grammy winner. He's among the top-selling artists in gospel music. He is known as a solo artist and as a leader of many gospel choirs. He is famous for songs such as Stop and Together, and has written numerous songs recorded by famous artists such as Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey. Reverend Al Green was raised in a religious household, but he came to music via rock and roll. He scored numerous rock and soul hits in the 1970s, but eventually turned to gospel music. He has occasionally returned to secular music, but has spent most of his career as a gospel singer and ordained minister. The influence of black gospel music spread far and wide in the 20th century. From mainstream singers off to urban acts, all maintaining a strong connection to the church. Additionally, the 21st century is currently witnessing the growth of gospel rap genre, but at its heart, the most traditional and heartfelt gospel music remains in the churches of the African American community. Communities across the United States can still meet every Sunday to come together in prayer and song. The lyrics of those old hymns and rituals are still sung and enjoyed today. The influence of gospel music transcends culture, race, and nationality. You see elements of gospel music and soul music across the world. Many of the biggest stars in the world, whether black or white, owe their success to the emergence of gospel music in some way. Thank you, and please welcome Makai Lacey, who is speaking on Christian rap.
Humans have been making and listening to music for over 35,000 years. With time, more and more musical instruments were developed, and people started to play them with one another. Today, there are many genres of music, with hip-hop being one of the most popular. One version of hip-hop is a smaller category named Christian hip-hop. Christian hip-hop came, according to holyculture.net, 70% of Americans claim to be Christians. I think if there's that many Christians in America, then Christian hip-hop should be more popular than it is now, or even a part of mainstream hip-hop. But there are still millions of people out there who don't even know this genre exists. Today I'm going to teach you more about the history, conflicts, and current trends of Christian hip-hop. Christian hip-hop has a short history next to other types of music. Because Christian hip-hop is a small, emerging category of music with very little history, there's actually some debate about how and where this genre got its start. But there are also smaller rap scenes in the UK, Australia, Brazil, and many other countries. But hip-hop music in America actually emerged from urban communities in the early 80s. Back then, it almost exclusively stayed in small underground scenes with minimal promotion and little mainstream attention. Gospel rap was filled with mainly faith-based lyrics. The very first official Christian hip-hop song emerged on record in 1982 with a track entitled Jesus Christ. The artist's name was Stephen Riley, who later released the first full-length Christian hip-hop album. In the 90s, though, Christian hip-hop entered a new phase as many artists came to the scene. This transformed the genre from underground to mainstream almost immediately. Groups like DC Talk and Kirk Franklin elevated the
Christian hip hop into the homes of youth who were excited to have hip hop music that their parents approved of. Once the 21st century started, the internet allowed more for the use of MySpace and YouTube. Since the 2010s, Christian hip hop has been played less on mainstream Christian radios, but found itself a following on Spotify and other streaming platforms. Today, Andy Mineo, Tadashi, KB, and NF should all be thanking Stephen Marley for his Bible Breakdown album that led the way for them to exist. This is just a brief history of Christian hip hop. However, even though it's not been around for a while, Christian hip hop has some conflict in it through the years. Although Christian rappers generally are described to be Christians, most rather describe themselves as artists who are openly Christian. Just like Christian rock and other Christian music genres, some artists welcome being called Christians, while others do not want to be labeled to just Christian music, do not limit their music to one marketplace. They like to show that they're the same type of music because the flow and the beats are the same. However, the lyrical content is what actually separates these two genres. This is where the conflict starts to set in. The main difference between Christian and hip-hop and mainstream hip-hop is what the artists are saying. Christian rappers spend their songs talking about how God bless them, how great He is, and what He has brought them out of, and other things that point their listeners towards God. Mainstream rappers spend their time talking about how much money and things they have. However, some Christian hip-hop artists do not want to be categorized as a Christian rapper because it will narrow the amount of people they would appeal to. But mainstream rappers seem to identify with a culture that opposes to what Christian beliefs and values. For a rapper to be considered a Christian hip-hop artist, there should be rhymes that point their listeners towards God, and the things of God. Christian hip-hop artists should try to lean more towards using their music for ministry. This conflict is not completely settled and leads to one of the most current trends in Christian hip-hop. One of the most current trends in Christian hip-hop is to interlace popular artists with Christian-like hip-hop lyrics. Popular artists like Kendrick Lamar, Chance the Rapper, and even Kanye West are weaving Christian themes into their music without apology. Surprisingly, the secular music marketplace is really starting to like this approach. But as mainstream rap has become more Christian, Christian rap has sadly become more mainstream. Artists like Lecrae are signing with secular music labels and refusing to be called Christian rappers. Many other Christian artists are releasing records that focus more on political attention and showing more risky lyrics that may easily offend or hurt more conservative rap fans. Toby Mac was actually the first rapper to have major success in the mainstream Christian music scene, and Lecrae has emerged recently on the mainstream rap scene too. Some Christians believe that hip-hop in any culture conflicts with biblical teaching, while others consider hip-hop to be a way of reaching unchurched youth in mainstream culture. It'll be interesting to see how these current trends influence hip-hop in the coming years. For those of you who are like me, and Group is a huge fan of hip-hop. Knowing that Christian hip-hop exists is huge, but many of us, after becoming saved, had to let hip-hop go once we became saved due to the amount of sin glorified in today's mainstream hip-hop music. But this is where Christian hip-hop comes to the rescue. Christian hip-hop for me was like a blessing from God because I was finally able to enjoy and listen to hip-hop music without listening to the sin-filled lyrics. Hope you learned a lot about the history, conflicts, and current trends of Christian hip-hop. And that's a wrap.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Can we give them all one more round of applause? Guys, y'all the class, parents, guests, you're welcome to come up and take pictures. Visit for a second before they head back. Thank you.
Did not make Look back and it's like still up to like the second slide. So I don't even know if it's changing.
Yeah.
It's just not.
But you kept on going. Yeah.
I realized
That's okay. Didn't notice. Exactly. And that's the key point. Keeping it elastic checks. Stress about it, okay, I can tell you're stressing. Stop stressing about it.